These poems are selected from the Bird Path collected longer poems. Scotia Deserta. All those cows, lochs and sounds, and the gulls at Larg's Pier, sitting in that cafe at the big window full of wind and light, reading and watching, thinking back to the ice, watching it move from the high middle spine out into the Atlantic, feeling it gouge out lochs and sculpt craggy pinnacles and smooth long beaches, the land emerges, bruised and dazed in the Arctic light. Gannets gather on the islands, eagles on the piney hills, cotton grass tosses in the wind. Men come, gazing around them. What name shall be given it? Alba. White beach meditations, mountain contemplations, imprinted in the mind. One left traces of his presence out there in Butte and the Gavelach Isles and Kilbrannan Sound, the holy voyage of Brandan. Brandan was maybe a believer, but that's neither here nor there. First and foremost, he was a navigator, a figure moving mile by mile along the headlands among the islands, tracing a way between foam and cloud with an eye to outlines. Sound of Islay, the Firth of Lorne, Tyree Passage, the sound of Mull, Skerryvore and Barrahead, Loch Alls, Kyle sound of Rassay. Ah, the clear sounding words, and the world opening. Other figures crossed the scene, like this one. Kent again, they cried him. And the church I attended around the age of 9 was that stained glass window showing a man with a book in his hand standing on a seashore preaching to the gulls. I'd be gazing at the window and forgetting the sermon all about good and evil with a lot of mangled metaphor and heavy comparison, eager to get back out onto the naked shore, there to walk for hours on end with a book sometimes in my hand, but never a thought of preaching in my mind. Trying to grasp at something that wanted no godly name, something that took the form of blue waves and grey rock and that tasted of salt. A rocky walk and the smell of kelp between Fairley and Largs. Drifting smoke, the glint of autumn leaves on Loch Lomond side. Ghostly gulls in the greyness. Kia, 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 kia. September at Applecross. Tyree on a March morning, the kingdom of the wind. 7 islands in the August sunlight. Islay, Jura, Scarva, Lunga, Luing, Shuna, Seal. Walking the coast, all those Kyles, Lochs and Sounds. Sensing the openness, feeling out the lines. Order and anarchy, chaos and cosmology, a mental geography. Have you heard Corryvreckan at the spring flood on the westerly blowing? The roaring so great you can hear it 20 miles along the mainland coast. Admiralty charts show a 9-knot race. To the senses that do no calculations but take it all in, it's a rushing white flurry, birthplace of a wave and wind philosophy. Let the images go bright and fast, and the concepts be extravagant, wild host, erratic guest. That's the only way to see the coast, all the irregular reality of the rocky sea-washed west. Pelagian discourse, Atlantic poetics, from first to last. Early morning light on Loch Sunart. While I write this, a grey heron is standing motionless in the early morning light of Loch Sunart. At the centre of a ring of silence, a grey heron, only the waters rippling. Language dare not be loud this morning. For still words, long fallen silent, listen, if you will, to these. Yefchi braten, sirushke ang, a gira rishkach stra, John and Clave Golyenver. A grey heron, watching, listening, in an early morning glitter of waters, maybe dreaming, fishing in nothingness. That is one way of putting it. Here in Loch Sunart, bright falling of the year, quiet, so quiet. Letter from Harris. The degree of isolation is higher here than in most places. The ancient foreland is continued in the islands of the Outer Hebrides, which mainly consist of Louisian gneiss, a metamorphic rock over 200 million years old. These islands stretch for a distance of some 150 miles along the west coast of Scotland and are exposed to the full force of the Atlantic waves and weather. Rhoda, where the young men built the beautiful ship that the sea coveted, and a great cleric lived who founded the grammar school in Paris. Rhoda this evening is an empty harbour, a rusty iron ring, and a heap of red seaweed. I asked the old woman if she liked it here. She answered, "I'm here whether I like it or not." And asked about the life, she said, £1.50 a score of herring, £40 a ton of coal, 14p a loaf of bread. I open the book and the words fly out of the page. Följen, Ian Levara, Boak, Brecht and Chill. As I listen to them talking, the remaining ones, I hear the phrases twining and intertwining like carving in a stony crypt or like the glorified lines of a precious manuscript. But when I walk alone, the rocks or the macher, the silence itself is illuminate. And I do not think of culture or even of subsistence. The question in my mind is of going outward, always further outward, to the farthest line of light. Phone reboot, Mr. Nicholson, Grimsby, 082380, Millimonday, 2 Florida Bay, 83234. Callum Ian McCorkadale might be able to take you, but I cannot give you his phone number. I believe he has a phone now, but his number is not yet in the book. Anyway, you go and see him, and if he's going out, he'll take you. Or if he's not going out, too bad. Ronald MacDonald of Pavulgari, Angus Cunningham, the Sapphire. The thousand shimmerings. This morning, the Sea of the Monks is a thousand shimmerings. We think of those northern islands as storm-bound and mist-wrapped, yet nowhere can there be greater brilliance of colour. The sea so blue, the rocks so vivid with saffron lichen. A meadow of sea pink in June contains all colours between white and deep purple, and the white-feathered birds reflect the boreal intensity of the summer light. Medusae on the white sand beach, colour of brandy and whiskey, are again infinitely pale, like the first clutch of living jelly in a Darwinian dawn. The disciple sits for long hours silent and motionless, till he enters a state of impassivity free of all thoughts. Finally departing from the self, he penetrates the domain of emptiness. A guillemot, reflected in the glassy water, shatters its image. In the room of roaring waves, Crow meditation text. Everybody knows the sad, sweet tale of the nightingale. But when crow starts croaking hard and hoarse, that's something else. Crow, I tell you, is one queer Joe. Crow is a ghost. He's a bird with a past. Crow is king of his own mad world in which he's always croaking. Usually nobody listens to Crow. But when one of your friends takes off for the Icelands and writes back in a letter about a weird crow encounter somewhere in the snowfields, and when a few days later, as you come through the door of a Montparnasse apartment, the first thing you set eyes on is a huge lump of a crow whose croaking days are over, but looks as if it knew a thing or two, you begin to wonder. You find yourself asking what there is to crow. Why does crow crow? Where does crow go? What does crow know? Crow, first of all, is polyglottal. Crow talks double Dutch with a mixture of Eskimo, Ruski Nahuatl, Sanskrit, Chinese Snohomish, as well as several brands of English. Crow has been around. Edgar Allan Poe was a crow. The anthropologist Inyar Barrow turned into a crow. I suppose all the crows were crows. I once thought of founding an academy of gulls based on an ancient Chinese model with one aim in view: say the world anew, dawn talk, grammar of rain, tree, stone, blood and bone. I can conceive of black gulls and white crows. No race fiends need apply. I mean, Crow could also be of the Gull Academy, the croaking member. But that plan went with the wind, and I ended up with broken wings on a cold island, smoking the weeds of my mind. Anyway, the fact is, birdmen are still going around, thinking a feather dream, croaking, yelling, squawking, all relative heavyweights, which is to say, no warbling or chirping. It's a tough world, and you have to be able to go it through blizzards. Ka, 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 krrr, krak, krak, kree, kree, kree. Drink cold water, feed on stones and bones, keep cool and fit, far out on your own, engaged in long-distance communication. Why does crow crow? Where does crow go? What does crow know? Ask hawk, hovering up there in silence. Ask the snowy owl. Ask the great skua and the rosy gull. All birds talk dawn talk in different lingos. Hölderlin in Bordeaux. Not overgiven to conversation. When opinions began trotting off the tongues, he tended to go away for a walk along the river. Why be a poet in such wretched times? I do what I can as well as I can. It all belongs to the work in hand. That was in the red days of autumn, with the grapes ripened on the Garonne hills and the memory of friends who had left on ships from the windy promontory. Back in Germany, they had nothing for him, but he would go back. Back to what? Some window overlooking a forest, maybe, a little philosophical light. Every day boats left the harbour for the Indies, the Americas. He paced the quays and watched them leaving, his journey lying in another direction. But how far would he be able to go when everything was overgrown with habit and with triviality and mere opinion? One may think of Greece, translate the tragedies, indulge in that archaic hyperbole, dream the ideal. The landscape had changed, utterly changed. He'd felt it crossing Auvergne that awful night, losing his way in the ice and snow. He'd felt it. The landscape had changed, colder, craggier, more massive. Poetry itself would have to change. No gods to sing to in a sun-filled theatre, and nothingness to face in an open expanse. Walking the streets of Bordeaux in the red days of September, watching how the shadows moved slowly with the sun, seeing at some high window a beautiful face that was there, then gone. You would have to learn how to travel alone. Remembering Gourgounel. Abandoned house, abandoned soil, walls tangled in thorns and vines. Who'd waste energy on land like this? Could work it years and no return, but here's a stranger, God knows why, pitching in to clear the rubble and ruck, sweat trickling down his brow and back. Old mulberries that still bear leaves, the summer in their last legs, gutted out and all out of shape, hanging on crazily to the sunburned slope. Bees nesting in them, honey gatherers, leave them where they are then, even their wrecks. They're still in touch with spinning girls. Hacking out a path among the wind, metal of mattock sparking rock, hot flies buzzing around my sweat, blue mist far away down the valley, sun throbbing fiercely in empty sky. A hawk circles quietly over the wood, snake slithers into matted grass. Goat's cheese from the neighbouring stead, and apricots fresh from this morning's tree, with rose-coloured wine from a Trappist cell. I lie still here among thorn and bramble, cool in the shadow at my midday meal, watching blue smoke rising from the western hill and white clouds sailing over Thunder Mountain. The smith has wrought me a handy axe, just the length I need for swinging, now up in a dark wood cutting rafters, clean axe head neatly lopping branches, then piling together tumbled stones. We'll have to learn how to build up walls, make a good job of that old tower. Work over, down to the hillside stream, clear water splashing by the little fall, wash myself enjoying the water's feel, seeing the dragonflies skimming the pool, dark blue winged in the evening glow, and butterflies like fluttering petals, all the colours of the rainbow. Long hours at night beside the lamp, studying the 10 books gathered here. Stars clustered thick at the little window, wind soughing coolly in the chestnut wood. A rat scuttles overhead in search of grain. My eyes settle down on the page again. That bird cry is the early dawn. Reading Shan in the Pyrenees. The disciples of Buddha called him poet-monk. Those of Lao Tzu called him hermit and mystic. And the Confucianists said he was a crazy eccentric who sometimes talked sense. For himself, he was just cold mountain, doing his best, never knowing exactly where it was leading him. Du Guangqing, 859-33, in his Shanxiang Shi, says Shan lived on Mount Kuiping in the Chantai Mountains. For the Taoists, the Chantai range was one of those places where men grow wings. Every now and then he'd go down to the Gourgounel monastery to get food from the kitchen, but mostly was up there among the white clouds. Hadn't always been there, though. Talks of Red Sparrow Street in Chang'an, where he must have raised the dust. Memories of sweet little girls, young girls playing in the twilight. The breeze blows their perfume over the road before making for the heights. An unorthodox character, outside the classifications. He'd do a little zazen when it suited him, but made fun of the straightbacks and shaven pates in general. Tao Buddhist, okay. But let's just say mountain poet and get into the poems. All 311 of them. A certain smart aleck by the name of Wang said my poems were all wrong and that I had no sense of prosody. They make me laugh with their correct poetry. It's just blind men singing about the sun. Let me find one man with clear eyes, said Shan, and my poems will go round the world. I sauntered off to see a great monk, misty mountain, mile after mile. The old fellow showed me the way back home, the round lamp of the moon. Strolling about and Hoarding Mountain, sky clear, marvellous day. When the moon's bright and all white, you can forget about east and west. Those cold mountain poems are like a day with two dawns. In Aquitania. I'll show you the tombstone, he said. No, not the tombstone, the Flamen and Doom, the Questor and District Chief, Verus, having acquitted himself in Augustus's presence of the charge that had been laid upon him, obtained for the 9 peoples their separation from the Gauls. Back home from Rome, he dedicates this altar to the genius of the place. Wind blows down from the Meseta. Warm rain drifts in from the ocean. Fir trees brush the snow line. High hill beaches hold coldness in their foliage. Heather and tough grass grip the sandy edge. On flakes of sandstone and pebbles and fragments of bone, they draw birds and deer and hares and horses, salmon and seals. Maybe somebody wandering in the hills raises that hoarse cry that starts down guttural low and winds up whinnying high. After the ice, the sea rises, rivers swollen, low valleys flooded, all along the littoral, lagoons and marshes, the coast seeping with wetness, dripping caves. People perched on the hills and ridges, keeping watch. Basque-Azilian lasts into the Atlantic phase. Maluka speaks of a vida neolítica con una economía de recolectores. The face of the coast, wrapped in mist. Maybe down to the shore in winter, red deer went down then to feed on seaweed and coastal grass. A diet of deer meat and shellfish, acorns and hazelnuts. Clearing forests by burning, marsh dwellings. Early words for weaving, tilling the soil, the same as in Caucasian. Old stories, the pagans grew wheat at the mouths of their caves. Sub-boreal, sub-Atlantic, onto sheep, cattle, goats and pigs. As the Basco said in the Pyrenees, my father keeps sheep, his father keeps sheep, his father, those black-headed sheep with the curling horns that have moved from winter to summer between the valley and the mountain pasture from time immemorial. Deep are the trails on these vales and hills. Maybe at the beginning the whole tribe moved in a nomad way. Then some went, some stayed, transhumance. Big stone burials and shelters, dolmens along tracks, ridges, watersheds, crests, open views to the east. Cromlechs higher up, windy peaks, rites of different types, eastwards to catch the dawning sun and give protection from the westerlies. Real writing had deserted Rome, Virgil and Ovid long gone, and went on in the Greek-minded cities of Provence, or in a quieter way, here in Aquitania, where the stone world still spoke to the ocean, and mind was open to wind. Ausonius to Theon, you who plough the sandy lands of the Atlantic, and to Paulus, where the swollen waters of the Gourgounel provoke the sea. The rhythm continued. Men were there to see to things and draw the lines. The landscape grew. It was possible to speak of peopled place and cultured space. Quiet Aquitania on the verge of ocean, brought forth from work and from meditation. This morning at Graillon, I dedicate this inadequate poem to the Dune Carnation. The Dune Carnation, little pink flower, its last home here on these Aquitaine sands. Little pink flower, carrying the whole of history in its slender roots, a world in miniature, and religion of a sort, destroyed by fools and motorbikes in the name of sport. Mountain study. Why does one study? For the white garnet element, having shaken the letters to become unlettered, living in the unlettered light. Every now and then I go up into the mountains, fire and snow, trudging for hours along the black line of the river, following it right to the crest. Or, when the snow's gone, moving up through the forest to the thin grass and the rocks, the high country. Up there in the stillness, thinking of nothing, only the body moving. Extraordinary ontological territory. Or in my study with the books of calligraphy, drinking tea or white wine and slowly leafing through the pages. Song of the diaphanous mirror, 1,000-character essay, account of the retreat of quietude, the pavilion of the drunken old man, treatise on understanding. But the finest piece of calligraphy I've ever set eyes on, back a few years in Taiwan, is a letter of 30 characters written by Wang Cixi in a tough winter of the 4th century to a good friend of his, asking him how he was faring in these cold days. A piece of calligraphy which, under the title of Clear Sky Just Before Snow, changed hands for 1,000 years, each of its possessors renaming his study in its honor, so that for 1,000 years, somewhere in China, there was a Just Before Snow study. If I named this study of mine after the pair of scrolls hanging in on the wall, 7-mile streams shine bright outside, 10,000 hills, autumn view, it would have to be something like the study of the 7-mile stream or the study of the 10,000 hills. In the study of the 10,000 hills, reading, those who know truth are not the equals of those who love it, and those who love it are not the equals of those who take active delight in it. Also writing. All morning this quiet thing happening, taking shape, unshaping, reshaping between me, the language, and the snow. Trying adjectives, so many adjectives, running through verbs, a fine flurry of verbs. What name for it all now? Midday and so little left, only cool, stillness, soft, drifting glow. When, opening a Chinese grammar, red binding still holding the smell of Glasgow, my eyes fall on Ta Yu Xie, great rain, snow. Movements in the snowy silence. What that line is, and this. No concern now with sense, only a calligraphy, a nameless and meaningless writing, to say without saying, the flurried fullness of, the inner murmuring of, the snowy silence. Labrador. Another dawn out from Greenland. Whales bellowing the icy sea, and a vast sky resounding with wind. Once more I felt that breadth of mind like being drunk, but this was colder and more clear than anything that might come out of a jug. It was what I'd always lived for, what I always will live for, till they throw me into the trough of the waves I was used to dance over. There are those who delight in a storm of swords, and those who make public speech with words. These are the warriors and the governors. I have preferred other ways, the lonely ways of the sky of sands, the gull path. In all my lonely ongoings, I have thought of many things. I have thought of the earth and its beginnings, when time was a sequence of cold dawns, and space was full of the wings of hallucinated birds. I have dreamed of a primal place, a place of rocks, quick streams and emptiness. Each morning the sun rising in the chill sea of the east, and throughout the long day throbbing above the rocks, above the waters. The earth then was a nameless place. I have been in love with nameless places. Now there are too many names. Norway of the blue streams is rank with names. The Hebrides and even Greenland, names, 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 and a welter of angry clamouring. It was time to move further west. And so another dawn out from Greenland, and still no other land in sight. Only the green waves and the wind, and a vision strong in the mind. I also named a place of great rocks and the sun glinting on them, a place filled with a rush and a flowing of water, as I called it, the marvellous shore. I lived the winter there. It was a time of white silence. I carved a poem on the rocks in praise of winter and the white silence, the best runes I ever cut. Men with long eyes and high cheekbones came to visit me. Our skins, there was peace between us. When spring came, all the streams running with light and the big river reflecting the sky, I travelled further south into a land of forest. I met red men there, dressed like birds. I was aware of a new land, a new world, but I was loath to name it too soon, simply content to use my senses, feeling my way step by step into the reality. I was no longer Christian, nor yet had I gone back to Thor. There was something else calling to me, calling me out, and waiting perhaps to be called. Something sensual and yet abstract, something fearsome and yet beautiful. It was beyond me, and yet more myself than myself. I thought of talks in Norway, the talk of poets and of thinkers. I thought of high talk in the Hebrides. Here was no place for Christ or Thor. Here the earth worked out its destiny of rocks and trees and sunlight and darkness, worked out its destiny in silence. I tried to learn the language of that silence, more difficult than the Latin I learned in Bergen or the Irish in Dublin. A whole new field in which to labour and to think. And with every step I took I knew a singular health, mind every day more sharp, more clear. I hazarded some more names, after weighing them carefully each one, trying them out in my mind and on my tongue. Great Whale River, Eskimo Point, Indian House Lake, Caribou Pass. But still no name for the whole. I was willing to name the parts, but not the whole. A man needs to fix his knowledge, but he also needs an emptiness in which to move. I lived and moved as I'd never done before. Became a little more than human even. Knew a larger identity. The tracks of caribou in the snow, the flying of wild geese, the red autumn of the maple tree bitten by frost. All these became more real to me, more really me than my very name. I found myself still saying things like, at one with the spirit of the land. But there was no spirit. None. That was outworn language, and this was a new world, and my mind was almost a new mind. There was no such thing as spirit, only the blue tracks in the snow, the flying of the geese, the frost-bitten leaf. Religion and philosophy, what I'd learned in the churches and the schools, were all too heavy for this travelling life. All that remained to me was poetry, but a poetry as unobtrusive as breathing, a poetry like the wind and the maple leaf, that I spoke to myself, moving over the land. I am an old man now, an old man very old. I have scratched these runes on a rock to be my testament. Perhaps no one will read them, and that is no matter. They will stand on a rock beside the scratchings of the ice, open to wind and weather. Nashvac Night. A summer night on the Labrador. In the twilight, watching countless birds settled and asleep. Only a few still in the wing. That passing flight of Sabine gulls. Is this a death or the prelude to another life? The question is all too heavy. Brings into this rippling silence like a bull into China. Better simply to wait, taking pleasure in the twilight. Tongues of water from the Labrador, running up the bays and fjords, lapping against the arcane rocks, will say the poem beyond the questioning. The birds are asleep. Geese, duck, brant, teal, plover, all are asleep, as though this land were one great sanctuary. Here, halfway between the old world and the new, a stepping over place, a place to rest on the long trail of the migrations, north, south, east and west. A place to rest, and yet I am restless, walking here in the stillness. Walking in the stillness, halfway between the old world and the new, trying to move in deeper, ever deeper, into a white world, neither old nor new. White world, neither old nor new. The bird path, feeling it out. Dawn comes with the cry of the wild goose. Brandan's last voyage. Entendez ici de Saint Brandan, qui fut né de vers Occident, qui 7 ans erra par la mer, pour plus de dieux et amer. It was a stony kingdom on the west coast of Ireland, with the wind wailing and the roaring of Atlantic breakers, with strange men wandering and murmuring, Ishi Modrui Christ Magday, my druid is Christ, the Son of God. One had always wished to wander further, Brandan by name, and a name it was that had the sea in it, the breaking of waves and the memory of a poem the old men would speak on winter nights. Bran thinks a great marvel it is to sail a boat on the clear sea. Bran's eyes see the waves of the sea waves shine in summer as far as the eyes of Bran can see. Bran loves to look upon the sea, the white sea broken by oars. There are men who are always ready to throw everything to the winds, men who can look on life coldly and stake everything in a gesture. Brandan was one of those. God for him was the great gesture that had set everything in motion. Also a great idea sailing through space, brighter than the sun and the moon. Brandan built him a boat. He built it of 17 places, making first a framework of pliant wood, covering it with bull hides tanned in oak, smearing the hides with grease and resin, a boat light as a bird to ride the sea. When the boat was ready, firm and true, he gathered men about him, saying, this will be no pleasure cruise, rather the wildest of wild goose chases around the rim of the world and further, a peregrination in the name of God and the promise of white martyrdom. They pulled away from Ireland, heading north, oars dipping into blue water amid a caterwauling of gulls. The going was good and the rhythm sure. To the east was the land of the White Hills, and they passed by Islay and the Isle of Tiree, then Barra, the Uis, till they came to Lewis. At the Isle of Lewis they went ashore, walked round the ancient stones of Pyrenees, then headed again for the open sea. The weather went grey, the sea grew gurly. Long days of rain, snow, sleet and wind, surely this must be the very mouth of hell. Brandan at the prow, crying into the greyness, Ishe Modrui Christ Magday, the words lost in the grey waste. Never letting up his holy chanting, he kept his eyes skinned for another island. Brandan's mind was full of islands. He had been born and raised among islands. The Hebrides he knew by heart. the Orkneys and the Faroes too. The world for him was all islands, and weren't the heavens themselves so made? He was looking for an island now, but so far north he'd never come. The world here was at an end. Here there was only sea and wind. At length he let loose one of his crows, and the crow made straight for the island of birds. Ka, kayagaya, kia, kia, branta, 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 grak, grak, grak. That island was noisier than a church. All the birds of the ocean had foregalled there, gulls and redshanks and cormorants, kittiwakes, terns and guillemots, geese and gannets and skuas. Some perched on pinnacles of rock, others flying wildly about. It was a goodly sight, and music in Brandan's ears. They pulled up the boat on a bit of beach, and turning it into a shelter, settled down for the night. When Brandan awoke in the morning, he was looking askew in the eye, and it looked for all the world like his old teacher Melville away back there in Munster. "Excuse me, Skewer," he said. "Can you tell me how far we are from paradise?" The Skewer gave a sturdy beat of his wings and stalked silently off. "I thought so," said Brandan. It was beautiful, the northern blue, and the clear white curling of the surf. Every mile was a broad blue page of vellum, and Brandan was working out the words. He thought in Latin and he thought in Gaelic, murmuring "Farspa, in deserto, trying for a freshness never found before. Brandan the voyager would be Brandan the poet, only if he could write a poem brighter and stronger than all other poems, a poem full of the rough sea and the light, the words for it, the words for a dawning. To build a boat is good, to sail the faraway seas is good, but to write a poem in which the minds of men could sail for centuries, that was his ambition now, with a long lifetime behind him. Brandanus laboriosus, they'd called him, when he was a busy abbot of monasteries. True, he had always worked like 10, Brandan the worker, Brandan the mariner. He had his reputation, sure. But he'd felt it over there in Iona, when he'd been in talk with that Columba, the one who thought poetry like a book, that somehow he was out beyond the pale of the literary folk, lacking their polish, their finesse. Columba the dove and Brandan the crow. Well, it wasn't polish and finesse he wanted. It was a freshness and a force and a beauty that they'd never know. Further and further they pulled away into the white unknown. Melville at Arrowhead. The white whale had made much headway. Neither had Marty. As for the ambiguities, it was a total flop, and there was nothing more to be hoped for from Hawthorne. So he'd retired to the country, a supernatural retreat, sitting smoking by the chimney, thinking, with always that sense of immensity and the physical, metaphysical thing still raging in his brain, but he'd try and take it easy. He liked it best when the snow piled up at Arrowhead. That removed any temptation to try and go somewhere else. Sure, his wife pestered him a little, he should take this pill or that pill, which would be good for him. And his daughters, well, they were pleasant enough young ladies, but what could they know went on back of those blue eyes? Sitting there by his chimney, raising smoke screens and thinking of impenetrable Japan. Now and then he'd get up and finger some object, the head of a harpoon maybe, a piece of ivory, that red back of a crab picked up on the beach at Nukuhiva. Or else he'd look at some map that's worn red and yellow and blue, and the ocean currents would be flowing again through his veins, a white path and a green sea, a quiet lagoon, a spouting of blood, masses of blubber, and Plato's ghost in the forecastle. What could any citizen know about his questing? What could any parlour poet know about white whales or unmapped archipelagos? Forget them. Life wouldn't last long anyway. Soon his bones would be joining the snow in the Berkshires and the red leaves in the autumn woods. Never had any regrets. But that brain of his kept working beyond all simple wisdom, grappling with uncouth cosmologies, groping along endless blind alleys, as though nothing could ever please it but the vision of some unheard-of poet. Here, man, supper's ready. The ocean wave. Travelling up the coast that bright blue autumn morning with a head full of Irish whiskey. A certain drunkenness makes thought come easy. What matters, I was saying to myself, nothing human, that's sure. It was one of those supernaturalistic journeys only an extravagant Scot or maybe a Greek or a Russian can know. Bonjour, beauté, I said, in passing to the world. Sea cloud in the sky. Oceanisches Gefühl. Bordeaux, Bourse Maritime, Danse Consulat, Bar de la Gironde, Tampico, Atlantic Bar. A whiff of dark red wine. And the big river, mother of waters, flowing slowly west in a golden haze. Mama Rose, foie gras, farewell to Gascogne. It was September. Red apples all along the road, night gathering, the waves darkening, kingfisher. A round white moon over La Rochelle. On the Place de l'Ancre, an electric guitar, and a slim girl singing Early Woman, Wind in the Tamari, cool wind in the Tamari. Don't bogus that joint, my friend, pass it over to me. Red lamp out in the harbour waters. Next morning, the flat lands of Vendée, low houses, marshes, fish, oysters, salt, white wind, white light. What whiteness we add to this whiteness. High bridge over the Loire at Saint-Nazaire, chantier de l'Atlantique. La Roche-Bernard, a full-sailed yacht coming silently down the Vilaine between the steep rock banks. Eros, Logos, Cosmos. Armorican territory, the Dumnonian coast, a sea-shaken house. Salutations to Duns Scott, Scotus Erigena, and old Pelagius. Vita maxima contemplativa. At the swirling center, fire wave, lightning flower. The house at the head of the tide. 5 miles out of town, you come to a place called the White Field. 2 wings and a whiteness, ideogram for perseverance. Moorland, a rocky coast, and 100 islands. The sea often green, girdly green, but every now and then a sharp, breath-catching blue with always breakers. Peace, peace in the breakers. A place this of darkness and of light. Darknesses and lights in quick succession. The sun reveals, cloud conceals, and always a music of wind and moor, tide and shore, and a silence. A 5th quartet. We must be still and still moving for a further union, a deeper communion, through the dark cold and the empty desolation, the wave cry, the wind cry, the vast waters of the petrel and the porpoise. A country lane lined with gorse. This house of stone lined with 1,000 books that speak of ideas, islands, according to an order as yet only dimly apprehended, vaguely sensed. Chaoticism. Where are we? Where are we going? One who has thought his way through the thicket says it is a question of moving into a new place, a clearing. We speak here in terms of Atlantica, a breathing and a breath. Pelagian space, what was left out and behind when the roads were built and the codes of command crammed into the mind. What was left out becoming more and more faintly articulate. Still there in the gull cry, the wave clash, those darknesses, those lights, but who hears, who sees, who can say? Another mindscape. Moving out then into the landscape, walking in the white of the morning, walking and watching, listening. Yellow flowers tossing in the wind, a crow on a branch caw-cawing, the rivulet reflecting the sky in blue-grey ripples, white beach rack, the high gait and snootiness of oyster catchers, a blue crab groping in a pool, bright shell. The notes accumulate. towards a writing that is more in view than the art of making verse out of blunt generalities and personal complaining. Atlantic archipelago, and a sense of something to be gathered in. The mind gropes like a blue crab in a pool, tosses in the wind, reflects the sky in ripples, flies high, leaves signs in the sand, lies recklessly strewn at the edge of the tide. Comes back to the books, the many manuscripts. Scriptorium in candida casa, altus prosator. Binoculars focused also on the red-roofed abandoned sardine factory at the tip of the promontory, some kind of homology. A place to work from, to work it all out. A place in which to house a strangeness. This strange activity. Philosophy, poetry, practice, theory. From an accumulation of data to the plural poem beyond the generality. The Chaoticist Manifesto. Wave, wind, wing, plunges, veers, play and display, idea, energies, blue, yellow, white, the light changes, no knowledge, Mr. Only the being there, outside what you wear, a space full of events, originary practice. What? Words without language, fragmentary syntax, and yet coherence. Chaos poem, this that is coming, Erigena, watch, listen, white wing, red roof, the writing, the thing seen, heard, the thing thought, raised into what is not metaphysics, but claritas, le bel aujourd'hui. They're all here, the thinkers, other the Anfang, writhing in the rack, wheeling in the light, blowing in the wind, the gathering, colloque de la côte, towards the plural poem, chorus, coruscations. Was the Chinaman up there on the hill, running helter-skelter down to the sea, feng shui. This is today, raised out of history. The pencil has been sharpened, the eye has been cleaned, the hand confirmed. No remains, economy of presence, here, now, this, worked out space, no scheming, anarchic and yet archaic, anarchy, the most beautiful paradox. Pelagius steps out of a holly bush, bright. Erigena walks quiet along the shore, sunt lumina. The mind is inspired, the landscape enlightened, the mindscape exists, no reason, no anguish. Who, what, without why, and the questioning fresh as the cry of the gull in the headland. Kia, 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 kia. Here at the sea's edge, laughing, a new laugh, quotations, at home in this topography beyond the nations. Whiteness is what it means, but a whiteness written like birch bark, like wave crest with lines and with sound, original, no ideal, no model, eventual. Nothing is absent, that this body-mind says it all the ways lead to here, have led to here. The sky has broken and the earth, sea-washed, is all diamond. The winter ceremony. It's still dark, with big flakes drifting by the window. And the roofs of the outhouses are all humpbacked when I switch on the radio. Brea semaphore calling. This is a national weather forecast for the coastal zone between Cape Frayel and Lanyon Bay, today 8th January. Very low temperature under thick cloud. Wind from 10 to 15 knots. Calm sea, visibility often less than 1 mile with frequent snow. The whole department of the Côte du Nord is absolutely snowbound. It's been snowing in Ushant for the first time in a century. Here at Gwenvid, above Lanyon Bay, beside the old sanctuary, there's nothing, no noise, only the grey sky, the blue forest, and the long murmur of the sea. Birds cross the sky now and then, gulls and sterns and sea pies, white and black and white, with an occasional thrush or sparrow brownly fluttering round the threshold. But mostly there's nothing, just the snow falling and the hum of the heating plant here in the study, and the white light, the subdued white light filtering through the snow-covered window. The myth people were living in Crooked Beach. The house of the wolves stood at the north end of the village. Their chief was called Travelling Wolf. It's been snowing for 2 weeks now, off and on, but over 2 weeks. When the snow's falling, the horizon's grey, when it isn't following the horizon's blue. My eyes have got used to this grey-white blue, to the wind and the silence, to the isolation. It's going to be none too easy to pick up again with society. I've been reading about the Quacutal winter ceremony, Franz Boas' account, all the dancing and the storytelling. But I prefer by far this quieter thing outside any community. His name was Lone Wolf. He went round the world, filling out the lines of the earth. Then he holed up in the snow, remembering and listening to the snow. Snow over Europe. That's the title of some 30s poem. When a red star shone over China and left book club editions stood on the shelves of my father's bookcase, a little last snowy piece before the big show. Somehow I hear nostalgic for all that noise, for the beliefs and the counter-beliefs, the stances and the stanzas about glory and humanity and the future, along with several other themes which hopefully by this time have been lifted by the scavengers. Let's get into the snow out there. Maybe to start off with, singing a little shaman song, something like this. There's a bear's head and a crow's wing at my door. I walk between blue forests and white shore. Nobody knows what I'm doing here, what I'm looking for. Are you with me? I went down to Seal Coast, the wolf people and the bear people and the crows. They went down to Seal Coast. Somebody started beating a drum. The old heron of the Yilmio is wrapped in a blue dream. There's a little band of oyster catchers freezing on the beach of Portsmouth Bow. I walk along the shoreline in the snow. Late August on the coast. Ah, the breathtaking beauty of this late August. Now the summer people are gone and the beach is silent again. Great mists rising up over the sea and moving inland along the little valleys. All morning it's a misty world, a quiet Niflheim. But by early afternoon the mist bank breaks, now here, now there, revealing blue, gleaming stretches of water, a piney wood, a red fern moor, a stony village. Rain, tea, and a butterfly. 8 o'clock. Grey sky and a quiet rain. I want to enjoy and maybe ingeniously employ long hours of this. So I've unplugged the telephone. Ah, this delicious sensation of total isolation. I just hope no one will turn up spontaneously to ask me if I believe in God and invite me to come and turn tables or tell me about their family squabbles. I look around at a few things I have on the wall. A 19th century print of a blue rorqual, 1/72nd natural size, stranded on a misty, rocky shore. A leaf from a zoological album showing a grey-backed seal, pelage moine, squelette à la tête, vue de profil, and a page out of Grönlandska fångar fortella, showing 8 fishes of Greenland, from the polar cod Gadus calarius to the sleeping shark Somniosus microcephalus. We whose homeland is the world, as the sea is to fish, says Dante. But what's the world? The eye moves on to a Japanese print, Kambara, Snow at Night, and to another, Sunset on a Snowy Day at Ushikawa. I go make some tea. The red earthenware pot is now there at my elbow. I lie out there on the bed with a Tunisian blanket, Avicenna, Avicenna. Drink the tea while it's hot and watch the rain, the quiet falling rain through the philosophical window. There's a butterfly there, some kind of admiral. I'm more than a little vague about admirals. Maybe it's old Chang Tzu come out of the teapot. Why not, after all, to talk with me about the Tao? Okay, butterfly, what's the Tao? Like, at least grammatically, what's the time? Flutter, flutter, a red flutter, flutter. I feel my pulse. The answer to an existential question could never be mathematical. There's Reich and Heidegger walking by. Rain and tea and a butterfly. Do I have here the makings of a fiction supreme? Will this rainy day at August's end give me a new look into reality or a wonderful waking dream? I go downstairs. Read a page or two of Melville, a page or two of Thoreau, a page or two of the Oregon Trail. I intend someday to write a series of lectures on American space and the question of the real that'll make David, Herbert, Lawrence and the rest sound like Paris Match or the Reader's Digest. The butterflies still fluttering at the window. I pour tea in the cup again and lie listening to the quiet rain. Epistle to the birds of this coast. You gulls who know this coast, from the Abervrack to the Seven Islands, you of the red-tipped beaks, you terns and kittiwakes, you oyster-catchers, you band of ghostly herons still holding out on the Ile Mio, a scene in the evening over the pinewood, grey-blue in the blue. This is just to say I'm glad and grateful that you're there, because if you weren't, if you were all gone, that would mean the others had won, the advancing ones, the constructive ones, with their crazy beliefs and their lousy ideologies, their oil slicks and their nuclear garbage, their noises and their nuisances. They don't know how to walk the coast. They have to have all kinds of games and animations. They don't even know what they've lost. So, please keep on using the sky as you know how, riding the wind with your eyes wide open, tracing out the shoreline along with something else that's harder to define. And throw out a choir or two now and then for those of us down here who care. That'll be a kind of reminder to accompany the signs we read silent to the stone, way beyond a heart's house, right into the bone. The nameless archipelago. Out there, nameless. Sometimes in certain lights I think I have it. That last glance over the coast rocks in the gathering evening, or in the white mist of early morning. But there's no exactitude. I'm not content, after all, to be a mystic. At other times I get exactness, but I feel it as fragment, like picking up a stone with no sense of geology. I can sometimes even feel part of it myself when I'm swimming in the sea, marine yoga kind of. But that's not knowing it, and there's no expression. I'm not even sure anymore what knowing means. And as to expression, I don't just mean poetry. I suppose what I'm after is closer to a kind of cartography. In the map room here, looking at the world of Dionysius Periegetes, Celtae, Scitae, Mare Cronium, the periplum of Peteus up to Thule, a nautical atlas Portuguese early 16th century of the northeast Atlantic, Oceanus Britannicus, Mare Hyperboreum, Al Sharkey's map of the Mediterranean, a Korean map of China and Japan, and a Blue River itinerary. Sometimes, maybe to make things easier, I imagine this nameless place as a bird sanctuary, people with creatures whose brains are less complex than mine, so that for them, everything clicks all the time. It's true that merely to hear the cry of some gull on the shore is enough to awaken Wakan, the old metaphysical desire. To say it's a sanctuary is to say it's admirable but uninhabitable. How to inhabit intimately a place with no name. One would have oneself to have no name, but if there are no names, what can one say? The music of the landscape. Listening in, late August morning, to the music of the landscape. Sea wind blowing veil after veil of grey up the valley of Guaslagorn. Flights of wailing birds over the fields, young birches with scarcely frosted trunks, rain whispering, hoarse, ragged fir trees on the skyline. Along the shore, all the islands wrapped in mist, but the surf outlines them with silent thunder. A restlessness, a movingness, a chaos noisiness, unruled masses of sound interrupted by sharp cries, or a wave breaking on ice-scored rock. No place this for sympathies or symphonies, any kind of easy harmonization. The weather is ever changing, from Dourven Point to Plumenach's centred complex, the topography abrupt. Yet there is something like a music there, and the grey rain, the sharp cries, and the wind that travels the changing skies. There is something immensely satisfying to the mind, corresponding to its highest demand, admitting no simple equations, and laughing at any solemn questions. A short introduction to white poetics. Consider first the Canada goose. Brown body, whitish breast, black head, long black neck, with a white patch from throat to cheek. Bill and legs black, flies in regular chevron or line formation. Flight note, ah honk, ah honk. That's the one old Walt heard on Long Island. And there's the barnacle goose. Black and white plumage, white face and forehead. In German it's Weißfangengans. Flight in close ragged packs. Flight note, a rapidly repeated nyuk, 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 like an ecstatic Eskimo. Look now at the Brent goose, small and dark, black head, neck and breast, brilliant white arse, more seagoing than other geese, feeds along the coast by day or by night, rapid flight, seldom in formation, irregularly changing flocks. Her cry, a soft, throaty, gut bucket ronk. The red-breasted goose has a combination of black, white and chestnut plumage, legs and bill blackish, quick and agile this beauty, seldom flies in regular formation, cry, a shrill, kee-kwa, who what? The greylag, pale grey forewings, thick orange bill, lives near the coastline, flies to grazing grounds at dawn, usually in regular formation, cry, ang, ong, ong, ang, ong, ong, like a Chinese poet exiled in Mongolia. As to the bean goose, she has a dark forewing and a long black bill. Talks a lot less than other geese, just a low, rich, laconic onk onk. The snow goose has a pure white plumage with black-tipped wings, dark pink bill and legs. In North America turns blue, a dusky blue-grey. In Europe you might take her for a swan or maybe a gannet, till she lets you know abruptly, with one harsh gark, she's all goose. So there they go through the wind, the rain, the snow, wild spirits, knowing what they know. These poems are selected from Handbook for the Diamond Country, collected shorter poems. Report to Erigena. Labour suddenly seems exactly right. Hard slogging, no facility. Like learning the basis of a grammar, working your way into unknown logic. It's earth and labour makes for diamond. Here on this nameless shore, knowing the work. Who are the workers? Who the travellers? Reality works. Wonders? Travel travails. The old signs come out of the morning. The skull fills and empties with the tide. Energy gathered, the first act. Ragged coast, rugged, rough winds. The language bears us. Rock province, roots and lights. Morning walk. It was a cold, slow-moving mist, clotted round the sun, clinging to the small white sun. And the earth was alone and lonely, and a great bird harshly squawked from the heronry as the boy walked under the beeches, seeing the broken pale blue shells and the moist piles of mouldering leaves. Chant. Birch writes, empty moors, raw skies, incredible snow, mussel beds, gull screams, lost islands, moon glow, wet woods, heron shells, crimson leaves, dark rain, hair paths, lightning flash, written rocks begin again. New moon. These walls have grown sullen, and I, lodged between a dairy and an antique shop, between a station and the library, read no future, live no present, sick with a belly full of memory, my skull like an old tin can that rattles, yet the sun will move northwards, rising in the frozen heavens, and the day will lengthen. New at the month's beginning, the moon on the 15th night, being close to earth and very full, will raise the tides like whales along the coast. The territory, up here in the White Country. Any tree for a totem, any rock for an altar. Discover. This ground is suicidal, annihilates everything but the most essential. Poet, your kingdom. McTaggart. What was he after there at Machrihanish, this man whose painting the little critic said had no finish? That sense of windswept space, sea and sky in multiple movement, landscape seen as mindscape, the human figures more and more transparent till they disappeared. If the question had been put to him directly, he would have made no answer, simply walked a little further along the shore. Crab Nebula. In this lighted chaos I live and move and have my being. In this mass of incandescence, the birthplace of a world perhaps, at least of a dancing star. In this lighted chaos I no longer think or feel, but am involved in this swirling matter. The former was no longer holding me. The former will be not even imagined. Near point of Stoer. Full moon and a wind from the north. Little sleep tonight. Up at 4, walking along a silent shore, trying to translate into a tongue that's known, a poem writ in the language of stone. The most difficult area. To attain the most difficult area. Pine branches, golden, grotesquely shaped, thrusting out from the parent stem. To attain the most difficult area. Pebbles smooth laid by the tide over gravel, now held in a seeing hand, complete. To attain the most difficult area. Bird skeleton found this day on the moor, flight and flesh in the ultimate nakedness. To attain the most difficult area. Sun Yoga. So much has gone, now there is only the sun. The sun up there, white gold and bare, maybe not free, but full of its own necessity. It's a world morning, and I sit here, rock-like breathing, breathing toward the sun. In a cafe at Largs, blue morning, sea like glass, gulls. Came Netunis' mind leaping like dolphins. The little Filipino waitress brings me another cup of coffee with a smile on the side. These concepts the human mind has attained, and the others still to be attained. Letter to an old calligrapher. 100 days along shore and mountain, with eye open for heron and cormorant. Now writing this at the world's edge, in a silence become a second nature, coming to know, in brain and in bone, the path of emptiness. Late December by the sound of Jura. Red bracken on the hills, rain, snow, hail and rain. The deer are coming down, the Loch dripped in ice, the stars blue and bright. I have tried to write to friends, but there is no continuing. I gaze out over the sound and see hills gleaming in the icy sun. Walls. On the first wall was a print of Hokusai. On the second was an X-ray photo of my ribs. On the third was a long quotation from Nietzsche. and the fourth was nothing at all. That's the wall I went through before I arrived here. Round north again. A blue-grey stillness with a dark waters flow, night of the heron. That branch among the fern was a red stag sheltering from the rain. Why did he return to that empty island, bog caught in the wind? Storm brewing, the world about to fall apart, the cormorant's black cackle. A grey shore and a battered herring box, Scot of Stornoway. Strathclyde. Early morning, a cold light blustering over the firth. 10 tolls in Columba's clock. Nice morning, isn't it? A ferry leaving for the islands. Gulls swarming round a fishing smack out there in the windy whiteness. Love dwells on the margins of the sea and in the mind. Late summer journey. The afternoon washed itself out with rain, and a little rainbow appeared above Barra, almost too good to be true. 2 hours later, all the blues having changed into greys, South Uist was a chain of black islands, lit coldly by the moon. Ludaig jetty. The small motorboat has putted its way out to the fishing. The bus has passed by to collect the children for school. The red postal van has delivered the mail. Now, here at Ludaig jetty, there is only the wind and the light, the cry of a peewit, and the lipping of grey water on white sand. Last page of a notebook. A bird yell emptied my skull. Ricks of hay lined the fields. A fishing smack lay at quiet anchor. It was Kyle of Tongue on a blue morning. A high blue day on Scalpay. This is a summit of contemplation, and no art can touch it. Blue, so blue, the far-out archipelago, and the sea shimmering, shimmering. No art can touch it. The mind can only try to become attuned to it, to become quiet and space itself out, to become open and still unworlded, knowing itself in a diamond country, in the ultimate unlettered light. Xenophanes of Colophon, poet and philosopher. When the Persians invaded Asia Minor, he moved to Sicily. Walking around the shore of that island, he wrote, "Even if you stumble in some rocks of the truth, you'll never know it all." He spoke of sea, wind, earth, clouds and rivers, and said that God was round. Found on the shores of the Black Sea. Ovid talking. I remember the rain at Brindisi that November. Virgil there 20 years before, shaking with malaria and so sick with humanity he'd have burnt his most ambitious book. It whispered round the inn where we drank the last wine and drummed, hummed and drummed on the roof of the cabin. Brindisi, with its homely fishing smacks clustered in the harbour and the long white beaches of the Calabrian coast. I, at that time, a broken man, taking a last whiff of Italy, the fishy quays, the olives and the cypresses, before moving out by the narrow channel into a grey Adriatic that smelt only of salt and a wind of exile whipping the sails. But look, out there in the waves, Proteus that pharaoh of the seals. Europe in the fall. After surveying around the Black Sea with a little Stambouli, I came back into Europe via Athens. Rain in the olive trees and not a living soul in the Acropolis. Where is everybody gone? Where the hell have they gone? All gone down into the plain. I sit in an empty cafe, drinking Turkish coffee, looking out on the rain. The last days of the academy. By the Christians' order, the doors were closed, so they went into exile, the last 7. Damascius the Syrian, Simplicius the Cilician, Gelamius the Phrygian, Priscianus the Lydian, Hermes and Diogenes Phoenicians, and Isidorus, who was from Gaza. They went first to Persia, then dispersed, each one alone, walking into the emptiness. Theory. The white fell almost in darkness. Outside, rocks in eruption, sea silence wavering, it is there. Rough shape clifted, that quartz chaos given, assured tide washed, and in the good space gazed at. Cast the first stone, only the thrust and the not silver, not white, not crystal splash. No reading in the widening circles. Great reason grasped, the 12-worded orator walks on the shingle with quiet eyes. A morning's work. The old black man, in tattered shirt and faded blue shorts, walks up and down the beach, up and down the beach, slowly all morning on the lookout. Then suddenly he crouches, eyes fixed, and stalks into the sea, his net at the ready, casts it, and carefully hauls it in. 10 silver fish, flapping in its meshes. A fragment of yellow silk. Among all that display of ancient treasure, one thing remains in my mind. A fragment of yellow silk, hardly bigger than a breast or a hand, unearthed on the road from Chang'an to Antioch via Samarkand. A raw blue morning in Antwerp. The rumbling of lorries along innumerable quays, Batavia Strat, Montevideo Strat, the sun's an eternally uncut diamond. For the Noviana from Copenhagen unloads tomato juice, Maria Jose counts her cash in the Caribbean bar. Letter from Amsterdam. It's raining. It's been 8 weeks long, dark raining, and I've been sitting in this empty room listening to the rain. It's a Europe of rain. All the bullshit of Europe washed away in the rain. And if I speak of Europe, it's because I'm thinking of India, looking at a photograph cut from a newspaper pinned to my wall. The photo of a woman, an Indian woman, a pariah woman, her dark, very dark face lit by a smile, a very naked smile, the white laughter of Shiva. Joseph Martin's report. The expedition lasted more than 6 months. We marched 125 days. The journey was 2,500 versts long, on 600 of which we had to hack our way with axes. We lost all the horses and 7 dogs. 2 men died, 1 went mad. The land is beautiful. West Labrador. Cold sun in the taiga, at times a faint rainbow. Thick moss on the forest floor, rivers, lakes, rapids, ice on the Shefferville dirt roads, thin snow on the forest ground, Indians out prowling with 30-30s on a hunt for caribou, hare, or white partridge. Ungava. Ever listen to the wind? Ever listen to the ice? Ever listen to the wind and the ice? That's Ungava. The name comes from an Eskimo word, Ungawak, the furthest place. Atchawakamik. Up on the edge of Hudson's Bay, between the River Severn and the River Winnisk, there is a place called Atchawakamik. In the Cree language, that means a place to watch from. They say on the point of dying, an old man planted his wigwam there, so that in his dying he might see the forests and the waters and the breath of the Great Spirit. If you go up there one day, try and see with his eyes. Autumn afternoon. Big silence here on the north coast, a few miles up from Thunder River. I drink the last of the whiskey, watching the maple leaves burn in the frosty light. I'm saying goodbye to something, but I don't know what. Southwest Corner News. Blue misty morning, sun white thistle. Can't see the mountains, but there's snow on the peaks. Fell last week night, will be gleaming noon. Egyptian tanks crossing Suez Canal, Israeli reservists rushing to battle. Red autumn here in Southwest Corner. Pyrenean silence, privileged, absolute. Drinking tea in rice grain bowl. Somewhere, somebody has to reach the cool. Prose for the Col de Marie-Blanque. Winter deep in the mountains. Thick falling snow. Here at the Col de Marie-Blanque, we're walking slowly. No study, no book learning. You just let it filter through the mind. There's nothing at all impressive about the Col de Marie-Blanque, just a little mountain pass. No place for sensational exploits. Something else. A reality man has the diamond of knowledge. The path moves up through the wood, pine, oak, birch. There's nothing much to be said. We don't talk. We just put one foot in front of the other and let the snow do the work. Only wolves live in the dark, silent wood. We're the white wolves of those final spaces. We love this distance, this winter light. Our life is secret. It's no longer ours. If the great frost has never bitten the branches, how can plum blossom be fragrant? When they ask me what religion I belong to, I'll say the religion of the Col de Marie-Blanque. Blue thistle sermon. Blue thistle on the dunes. Blue burning thistle on the dunes. Its roots in sand, but sturdy as hell. The sun beats on me in the blue thistle this long afternoon. I contemplate the blue thistle, and the blue thistle contemplates damn all. The Old Sea Chapel at Paimpol. Inside, religious rigmarole. But here on the grey stone wall, austere and plain, exposed to wind and sleet and rain, the ex-votos. In memory of Sylvestre Bonnard, captain of the sloop Mathilde, lost in Iceland. To the memory of Sylvestre Camus, lost in the region of the Northern Fjord, in Iceland. The eye moves on down the beach, where, on the shingle line, bulky and black, somebody's mending a boat. A letter from Wisconsin. It comes in an almost illegible scrawl from North 85th Street, Wauwatosa, Wisconsin. And I wonder what crazy man's written it. Full of American intellectualese, the sinews of entropy, congruency to my reality. Yet it pleases me. It pleases me well. There's a wild coolness back of the jargon, a man's voice in Wisconsin, and the silence under Orion. On the quay at Lannion. There they were on the quay at Lannion, mother and daughter selling spider crabs. Big ones, real beauties. And I said, where were those fish from? Our place, she said, at Paimpol, beyond the hollow rock. Meditant. It was the cool talk of the gulls he liked, and rain whispering at the western window. Long days, long nights, moving into what was always nameless, where the walls were hung with maps, and below him lay a library of science. Outside, at the end of that dark winter, he saw blue smoke, green waters, as he'd never seen them before. They were enough. A black crow busy on a branch made him laugh aloud. The shape of the slightest leaf entertained his mind. His intellect danced among satisfactory words.